Hello and welcome to The Arise interview, where we take time to reflect on the big stories from the news and on the fortunes and affairs of the world in an hour of conversation with commentators, analysts and thought leaders. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Coming up in the next 60 minutes, after a delay of a year due to the coronavirus lockdown, voters in the British capital, London, will go to the polls in less than a month to elect a new mayor or to re-elect the incumbent Sadiq Khan. There are a record-breaking number of candidates running this year. Among them is my first guest today, Nims Obunge, a British Nigerian pastor who became famous in the UK for setting up the annual Week of Peace, an event that promotes harmony right across London and beyond, and boasts of the participation of the British Prime Minister. Nims Obunge, independent candidate for Mayor of London, and the man they call London's Dove of Peace, coming up. And later, the African Development Bank appoints Atsuka Toda, a Japanese citizen, as its new acting vice president to be in charge of the critical Department of Agriculture, Human and Social Development. She's been at the bank since 2016 and has been responsible for its investments in agri-business companies and its development of special agro-industrial processing zones. So now that she's moved up the ladder, what will she bring to her new role in a continent that's desperate for agricultural innovation across the entire value chain? Atsuka Toda, the new acting vice president at the African Development Bank, coming up. Now, it's just over 2 decades since a British Nigerian pastor from Tottenham in North London decided it was time for him to roll up his sleeves and see what he could do about the spiral of street crime and violence on his local streets. Well, Pastor Nims Obunge put his energetic mind to it, and what emerged was the Week of Peace, now in its 21st year. It began in the district of Haringey as an opportunity for families and young people to express their dismay at the growing culture of gun and gang violence, but it's now grown beyond recognition. Every September, the annual Week of Peace spreads right across London and beyond, with its big showcase concert filling Trafalgar Square, but also embracing marches, talent shows, religious and social gatherings, sports meetings, and a special award ceremony to recognize the many efforts by individuals to promote harmony across London. But now Nims Obunge has set his mind on an even bigger project to become the next mayor, and indeed the first black mayor of African origin of the City of London.
Hello London, my name is Nims Obunge. On the 6th of May, Londoners are going to be making a decision on who their next mayor is going to be. I'm still in the race, running as an independent candidate, because I really believe this is a time in our city where we need to address street crime, we need to address the issues that impact our lives, such as climate change, and ensuring that we have an economy that thrives. COVID has impacted so many lives. We have lost some loved ones, some of us have been furloughed, some of us have lost our jobs, and I know this. In my community, I'm serving over 3,000 people who are desperately in need of support. And so what I want to do is I want to be the people's mayor. I want to be your mayor. So on the 6th of May, when you have an opportunity to stand before the ballot box, take Nims for London. Take Nims Obunge. Let's make sure we have a city where we're moving forward together to ensure this city thrives. And that is our vision, our Hope 2021 campaign, to make London the city of our dreams. Let's move forward together. We can make this happen. I encourage you, vote for me and let's make it a dream.
Well, that's his big plug there. So could Nims Obunge, the British Nigerian pastor and charity worker, be the next mayor of London? Well, let's cross to London and speak to the man himself, Nims Obunge, independent candidate for London mayor. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Obunge, for joining us. So short and sweet, give us the pitch about why you want to be mayor of London.
First of all, thank you very much for having me on Arise interview. And I really want to say this. London has unfortunately gone through a very traumatic stage as a result of COVID. The world has influenced the impact of COVID and has been impacted by the influence of COVID. But here is our reality. For the last 25 years, many young people have been shot and stabbed on our streets. Here is our reality. Socioeconomic deprivation has impacted so many communities in London. And we have continued to try and address that, talking with different prime ministers from Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, Cameron, Theresa May. I've spent time with Boris, done the same with mayors of London, Ken Livingstone, Boris, and even Sadiq. But they failed to deliver what's needed in the poorest of our communities. I believe that as mayor, having been a practitioner and as one that can build bridges across both the Conservative and the Labour parties, where I can bring professionals and practitioners into one place where we have an independent candidate, not caught up with partisan politics, but with a passion to see London change. We can do something where we provide a safe environment for our young children and our families, affordable homes for all that live in London, and ensure that we achieve prosperity and a green revolution in our city. That's my pitch, and that's my passion.
Well, thank you very much indeed for letting us into that pitch. But as you said, it is a pitch, so let's get more particular. What knowledge or experience do you have that you think qualifies you to be Mayor of London?
Well, thanks a lot again. Over the last 20 years, I've had the challenge of addressing violent crime. I used to chair the London Criminal Justice Board Advisory Group. So I was on the Criminal Justice Board overseeing criminal justice for all of London. I was also in charge of the Met Police Operation Blunt, chairing the response to knife crime across all of London. I sat on the Trident Independent Advisory Group, sitting as key advisor to the Met Police and government around the issues of gun crime and violent crime. I scrutinized the Met Police around stop and search. So I was on the stop and search scrutiny panel for the police, and I was also on the Home Office roundtable, sitting with several prime ministers and Home Office secretaries addressing those issues. In the borough of Haringey, I used to chair the Violent Crime Commission Board. I was overseeing domestic violence across all the whole area of Haringey, and then also I happened to have the privilege of being the lead for the Black Leadership Empowerment Network for the Olympics. And I was one of those that did the video to say, bring the Olympics to London. I've worked, I know I'm known as a charity worker and as a pastor, but there's so much work I've done with government and in government. And I mean, I could go on, but I'm not trying to throw my credentials out there. But here is one reality. I have a team of experts also that I have developed relationships with over the years. I've worked in prisons, from Felton Prison, Belmarsh Prison, Holloway when that was a prison for ladies. I worked with the Governor General of Prisons that oversees, he was overseeing all the prisons for the UK. He's also on my team. We have significant leaders who are ex-police officers who are on our team, and folks who have worked in government, who have been advisors to prime ministers. So they all form part of this team. So I'm not going in there on my own. Neither am I going in there blindsided. I'm going in there with the expertise of relationships I have developed from my working within the government's parastatals here in the UK.
Well, I mean, that's a very broad experience indeed, and I read some of your material. You've got quite a lot of experience there, but I mean, beyond what you've done and the team that you've got, do you actually know how city government operates? Because I mean, that's important, isn't it, for administration and for planning of a city like London, a complex city?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to know the experience that Boris Johnson had of running London before he did, or of Sean, who's running, or of others who have run, MPs who have been in places. What happens is you work with a team of experts and professionals. What I do know is I understand the statistics. I understand what the issues are that represent London. I suppose my experience in working in London and working across London within the London Week of Peace, working in every single borough, has allowed me understand the issues that impact every part of London, from the north, south, east, and west of our city. And what it takes to run the city is making sure that you are the chief of staff and you're not the only person. I've worked with Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Jews. And so what I can clearly say to you is this: London is the most diverse city possibly in Europe and maybe in the world. And that diversity is something we celebrate. And what it's going to take to make London thrive is somebody that can build bridges. London's a city of bridges, and I believe I'm the bridge for London.
But of course, you are running as an independent, and some have argued that London can actually, and that's positive for you, can actually better realise its potential if it has an independent leader with the spirit of the outsider who is beholden to no one. Does that fit into your philosophy as an independent candidate?
Most certainly. Can I put it to you, just so you understand what happened in the last election? In the last election, Sadiq Khan won by 1.3 million votes, and that was after they counted the second preference votes. So in essence, what transpired was when Londoners went to the polls, only 1.3 million people was what it took for him to win the first preference vote. He only got 1.1 million, which was only about 46% of those who voted. By the time you counted the second preference vote, because that's the way the election works. It works by a two preference vote system. He was able to get 1.3 million. What they do is they discount the rest of the candidates and only look at the top two and look at their second preference votes. So he got 1.3 in a city of 9 million people. In essence, what you had was political apathy. Most people, mainly from the black and minority ethnic communities, the Asian communities, just didn't feel they had any skin in the game. They didn't feel it was their election. They didn't feel that they had somebody that represented their voice. They didn't feel that their core issues will be represented, so they didn't vote. So what we want to do is awaken the sleeping giant within the black and minority ethnic communities and those communities that are not caught up in partisan politics, and say to Londoners, hey guys, if the 4 or 5 million of you who didn't vote in the last election choose to stand up and be counted, then we can have an independent mayor who bridges the gap between the Conservatives, Labour, Lib Dem, and all the other parties and make us succeed.
Okay, please stay with us. Would like to talk with you for a few more minutes. You're watching the Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead as we continue our chat with Nims Obunge, the British Nigerian pastor and charity worker who could become the next mayor of London. Stay with us.
Everybody.
Welcome back to the Arise interview. I'm Charles Anyegolu. Now, my first guest today, Nims Obunge, is a British Nigerian pastor and charity worker who wants to battle the growth of violent crime in London, the British capital. So, Mr. Obunge has decided to take on the incumbent mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, as an independent candidate in the upcoming mayoral election on May the 6th. Mr. Obunge says he never wanted to be a politician, but he's been approached from across the British political divide by family and friends who believe he can do a better job of it because they say he understands the issues and would fit into that role. He's the chief executive of the Peace Alliance, which was set up to tackle knife crime in London, and it's had the support of successive British prime ministers. But it's one thing to run a charity, quite another to be the administrator of a complex city like London. Does he have what it takes to be the next mayor of the British capital? And the British Nigerian pastor and charity worker Nims Obunge, independent candidate for Mayor of London, is still with me on the line from the British capital. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Obunge, for staying with us. And before we went on a break, we were talking about the advantages of being an independent candidate. On the other hand, being an outsider means that you, to some extent, don't have the insider knowledge, as they call it, and the support of a party that's been in city governments. Do you see that as a disadvantage?
As a matter of fact, I don't. Thanks a lot, Charles, because I actually find that as an advantage. I'm not encumbered by the political trickery that often happens within politics. I have hosted many hustings for previous mayoral candidates and political candidates who were running for London. And in my promotional video, you would have one where you'd see me with Ken Livingstone, Boris Johnson, Brian Paddock, who were running on the platforms of partisan politics. And I'll never forget one moment when I said, guys, do you know what? I'm looking at all of your faces, and the only thing different about your policies is your face. And that's what's happened over the years. And I understand the inside knowledge, but here's one reality. We want to reduce crime in London. We want to have a safer city. And I know what it takes when we're having to bury young Londoners who have been killed or who have been imprisoned. And what I know I want to do is I want to set up a special constable program which brings in practitioners and professionals into our police service who are not necessarily paid to be in the police service, but that is their give back to society. So whilst Sadiq has a ridiculous budget of nearly whereas he has a ridiculous budget of so much, what we're looking to do is ensure that that budget is actually focused on securing the safety of our children. I want to also ensure that what we have in London is a London where we're looking at modern methods of construction, working with a team that understands what it will take for us to aggregate faster than what Sadiq has done. The homes that need to be built, social housing homes for many people that need homes in London. Many people are being priced out of London. I want to keep them in London. And so that's one thing I'm very, very passionate about. The other thing that I think is so important is understanding how important young people are and the need to give them entrepreneurial opportunities. What we're lacking right now is entrepreneurial opportunities for many young people. And that's where we're going to have innovation hubs in many of our youth centers. These are things I know I can deliver. I have delivered in different forms, and I'll do it yet again. We want to provide opportunities in London for Londoners. And the only way we can do that is not get caught up in partisan politics, but get caught up in the issues that impact Londoners, allow me to work with Labour, Conservative, Lib Dem, and all these other parties to say, let's work as one unit because London deserves better.
Now, I mean, you've mentioned Sadiq Khan a number of times there as you were speaking. I mean, he is, of course, running again. He was elected Mayor of London in 2016, and before that he served as MP for Tooting for 11 years. I mean, give us your critique of Sadiq Khan's record and why he shouldn't be re-elected, because, I mean, the rest of London certainly doesn't think so. He is the front runner by a wide margin.
Let me just remind you of what I said. A wide margin means 1.3 million in a city of 9 million people. No, that's not a front runner. That's being voted mayor by the minority because the majority don't care, and because the majority don't feel that you care enough about them for them to even play a role. And so what we want to do is awaken many of us who are in the black and minority ethnic communities, and many Londoners who have said they're tired of Sadiq Khan. He's been mayor for 5 years. He's always arguing with central government because he says central government is conservative, he's Labour, and he's not getting the support he needs. What Londoners need and what Londoners want is not a mayor that's always quibbling and fighting against central government and therefore reducing the opportunity for us to prosper as a city. What we want is somebody that can act as the bridge. That is what I've been alluding to. And let me say this: Sadiq, for all his good intentions, and it is true that once you put your head above the parapet, get ready to get hit. He's failed to deliver on violent crime. He's failed to deliver on an affordable London. He's failed to deliver on a prosperous London. He's failed many Londoners. The business community call him the absent mayor. So it's not just me that is putting this critique against him. He may be seen to be the front runner because they always say the incumbent has the advantage. But I want you to understand, never undermine one that might be the underdog. Leicester City, we're not expected to win the Premiership, but they won. And I think recently we had a young lady who won, I think it was Rachel Blackmore, I'm trying to remember her name, who won the Grand Nationals. You don't expect certain things to happen. I expect Sadiq to take a side step while I step into the mayoralty and bring London together, bring a sense of hope, aspiration, and motivation to our city. I don't think he'll be mayor by the time the 6th of May comes in, because Londoners deserve better.
Fair enough. I would have been astonished if you'd said something else. But of course, if you win, I mean, you would be London's first black mayor of African origin. Is your racial background a plus or a minus for you in this race? Is it the subject of media interest or general public curiosity or not? I mean, have you been made to feel your position because you are a man of color?
Well, issues about color have often intrigued me. I am black without a doubt. Black Lives Matter protest, I was on the streets with the young people and members of our community. And SARS, I was on the streets with our community as a black Nigerian. My father was a Nigerian ambassador, and he's taught me to celebrate the heritage of my heritage. I never shy away from it. But there was one thing that happened after the Black Lives Matter. I said, here's a protest where we are actually demanding that we've got to look at the issues that have impacted black communities around institutional racism, housing, education, employment, and policing, and the list goes on. But something occurred to me. I thought that in crossing over the road, I noticed at a zebra crossing, it took a black and white spots on the road that allowed us to get to the other side of the road. And I made a decision to get in touch with Barna Stroud. And what we do is we now co-chair the Race Equality Commission for all of the United Kingdom. And what we've said is we will continue to look at issues of race and equality in order to make sure that as black and white and all our commissioners are from across the divide within the United Kingdom. And we're sitting together in order to address the issues of race and the disparity that exists within race. So I don't look at myself in the entirety just as a black man. I look at myself as a champion for equality, justice, and fairness for all. And I hope that Londoners will see not just the color of my skin, but the passion in my heart to see just change that will come to our nation and our city. That's what I represent.
Well, you certainly come across as a very passionate person indeed. I want to thank you exceedingly for joining us from London. That's the British Nigerian pastor and charity worker Nims Obunge, who is an independent candidate for Mayor of London. Thank you very much indeed. You're watching The Arise interview. Plenty more still ahead, including as the African Development Bank appoints Atsuka Toda, a Japanese citizen, as its acting vice president. We'll find out what she'll bring to her new role. Stay with us.